Funding for this program is provided by Annenberg Learner.
Hello, I'm Pardis Sabeti, and this is Against All Odds, where we make statistics count. We've already learned that in the world of random phenomenon, probability models provide us with a list of all possible outcomes and proportions for how often they would each occur over the very long term. I could use a probability model to find out how many times I can expect to get heads on a coin toss, or how many daffodil blossoms I can expect to see in the spring based on the number of bulbs I plant in the fall, or even how many children in a family inherit a genetic disease. You may notice a common thread throughout all these examples. They're all concerned with things that have only two possible outcomes: heads versus tails, blooms versus none, sick versus healthy. Traditionally, we think of one possible outcome as a success and the other as a failure. Like when dealing with random variables, in this case what we're interested in is the overall count of successes. The count forms a particular kind of discrete probability model, the binomial distribution. A device called a quincunx illustrates the idea of a binomial setting. The ball has only two choices when it hits a peg, to go left or to go right. Those are the success or failure options in this case. In addition to a situation having only two possible outcomes, there are three more conditions that must be true in order for it to be in the binomial setting. I could do yet another coin toss to demonstrate these, but let's take a look at something a bit more exciting. Basketball free throws. Free throws are mostly clear of any defensive pressure or other external factors during a basketball game. We only need to be concerned with whether or not the ball goes into the net or not. The first trait of a binomial distribution is that there is a repeated, fixed number of trials or observations. In this case, n equals the number of shots taken. A basketball player could make hundreds of free throws during a single season. Second, all of these trials are independent, meaning that the outcome of one trial does not change the probabilities of other trials. Now, conventional basketball wisdom might tell you that this isn't true if a player has a hot hand. Some people believe that a player on a shooting streak is more likely to make subsequent baskets because of the success of previous shots. But a 1985 study proved that this wasn't the case.
There is no positive correlation between successive shots. In fact, there's a slight negative correlation. And what that means, translated into a more intuitive statistic, is that the probability of making a shot after having just made your shot isn't greater than after having just missed your shot. And we find players are not any more likely to make their second shot after making or missing their first. The outcome of the second shot is independent of the first shot.
Therefore, free throws do fit this trait of a binomial distribution. The third trait that we must look at is whether or not each of the trials end in one of two outcomes, success S or failure F. Our basketball example fits. Either the ball goes into the net, a success, or it misses, a failure. Lastly, the probability of success, or P, must be the same for all trials. Free throws are always shot from the same distance, and there's no defensive pressure that would be present during play. Each time a player lines up at the free throw line, he has the same probability of making a shot. It's based on his particular shooting skills. So there you have it. Basketball free throws fit the binomial distribution. Now that you've learned how to identify a binomial distribution, you'll see that pattern start to pop up everywhere. For example, binomial distributions can help determine the probability of how many children in a particular family will inherit a genetic disease.
Hey, Mikey. How you doing?
Hi.
Hey, Mom.
Hi, Dr.
Come on in. Hop up on the table. Where did you get the pain when you had it?
Sickle cell disease is a genetic disorder of the red blood cells. estimated to affect around 100,000 people in the United States. It can cause a great deal of pain, life-threatening infections, strokes, and chronic organ damage.
Inside the red blood cells, a protein called hemoglobin. And that hemoglobin, there are many different types around the world. In the womb, we all have fetal hemoglobin, or hemoglobin F. And when we're born, we change over to hemoglobin A, or hemoglobin adult. But many people around the world have inherited other types of hemoglobins, and one of them is the sickle hemoglobin, or hemoglobin S.
In people with sickle cell disease, the hemoglobin S molecules cause the normally round red blood cells to distort into a sickle shape, which causes blockages in the blood vessels. Tissues downstream are starved of oxygen, causing damage and much pain. Like all genetic traits, the genes that determine an individual's hemoglobin type are inherited, one version from each parent. Since it's a recessive disease, a child needs to receive two bad versions of the gene, one from each parent, to have the disease.
So in the typical situation, two parents who are carriers or who have trait, one bad copy of the gene, each time the mother makes an egg, there's a 50% chance that she'll produce an egg that has the sickle mutation, and a 50% chance she'll produce a normal egg. On the other side, the father, 50% chance his sperm will have a sickle mutation and 50% normal. And so when the sperm and the egg come together, statistically there's a 25% chance of having the so-called normal AA genotype, about a 50% chance of having the AS trait, just like the parents themselves, and about a 25% chance of having the disease SS.
Even though there are 4 possible genetic combinations, only one of them results in a child with sickle cell. The other 3 combinations would result in a child without the disease. So inheritance of this trait fits the binomial distribution because there are only 2 possible outcomes, a child with sickle cell disease or a child without. And because the parent's genetic makeup never changes, these odds are constant for every child they conceive.
Some of the common misperceptions or complications are that families feel that once they've had one child with sickle cell disease, that their next 3 are going to be okay. But in fact, no, it's with each pregnancy there's that 1 in 4 or 25% risk.
Sickle cell disease fits the binomial distribution. There are only 2 possible outcomes, a sick or healthy child. The outcome for each child is independent. N is the number of children in a particular family. And the parent's genetic makeup never changes, making the probability of having a child with sickle cell the same for each pregnancy. We know that the probability of a child having sickle cell disease is 0.25 if both parents are carriers. Having sickle cell is labeled as a success for our statistical purposes. Success is a trait that we are counting and of course has nothing to do with a successful health outcome for the child. You can calculate binomial probabilities by hand or using software or a graphing calculator. Once we have them, we can use the numbers to visualize the data on a probability histogram. Let's look at the probability histogram for sickle cell disease in families with 6 children. The y-axis of our histogram shows probability, while the x-axis shows the number of children with sickle cell disease in a family with 2 carrier parents. The x-axis runs from no children having sickle cell to all 6 having the disease. We can see from this histogram that the probability of having 3 children with sickle cell, for example, is 13%. Public health officials might want to find the mean of this distribution. Luckily, we can calculate this pretty easily. We just multiply the number of trials, n, times the probability of success in an individual trial, p. In this case, we would multiply 6 by 0.25 to get 1.5. So the mean number of children with sickle cell disease in families of 6 children where both parents are carriers is 1.5. Of course, no family has 1.5 children. This number is the statistical average. Until recently, most sickle cell care treated the disease's symptoms, trying to break down those blood flow blockages and alleviate pain. Now, many patients also take a preventative drug called hydroxyurea that was found to cause patients to start making fetal blood again.
Even though they were well outside the womb, they started making that hemoglobin F. And what's interesting is the hemoglobin F stops the hemoglobins in the sickle cell from snapping together and changing the shape of the cell. So now we have large groups of patients who are being treated with this medication. And although it's not a cure, it does decrease a lot of the complications that we see, particularly the pain, admissions to hospital. And so it's really made an incredible inroads into this disease for those who actually have it available to them and take it.
Dr. Heaney and his colleagues are working on a gene therapy protocol that would get sickle cell patients' bodies to make more of that fetal hemoglobin on their own.
not so much to fix the sickle gene, but to sort of fool the blood stem cells into thinking they're in the womb again, so they stop making sickle blood and they make fetal blood. So we hope that in a couple years we'll be starting a trial for that.
Stem cell transplants are also possible for patients who are interested and have a good donor match. So as the medical science advances, researchers and physicians like Dr. Heaney hope that children born with sickle cell disease can look forward to a day in the not-so-distant future when there's a real cure for every patient. For Against All Odds, I'm Pardees Sabeti. See you next time.
Funding for this program is provided by Annenberg Lerner. For information about this and other Annenberg Lerner programs, call 1-800-LEARNER and visit us at www.lerner.org.